welcome. We are live. Oh, I'm hearing some feedback. Oh, it's my phone. Sorry, guys. Um, uh, so, Amanda Bass, Julius Jones's lawyer, gave an interview on the Death Penalty Info podcast called Discussions with DPIC, hosted by Ann Hollinger. Hollins, say it for me, Amy.
I can't.
Okay, Hollins,
By
Hollins.
that girl.
Oh my God, Holsniger. Sorry, I have my tongue
Singer.
is. Thank you. My tongue
Yes.
is tied tonight, and I have with me Amy Kingry from the Victims Innocence Project in Oklahoma. She wanted to come on and talk about this incredibly crazy podcast. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Roberta. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, why do you want to talk about this podcast?
Well, I think first, I didn't even know that it was out. Another person brought it to my attention, and I was like, "Oh, all right, I'll get to it." Well, I started listening to it yesterday morning, and had no idea that it would contain what it did. The statements, would contain what it did. Nor was I expecting continued lies in there. I expected to hear a little bit as far as, they were disappointed, but the fact that they took it to the extreme of acting that Mr. Jones deserved more, or that any criminal that has, been convicted of murder, exhausted their appeals, to put it in a sense, the way I took it was they were acting as if Mr. Jones or anyone else that's about to be executed should have more rights than the victims or the victim's family themselves.
Well, they frame this. It's so strange. They frame Paul Howe. Amanda Bass says in this that Paul Howe was a white, prominent business owner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I don't know, I'd love to hear from my audience. When I hear that, I think of Colonel Sanders, the chicken guy, or some white, prominent business owner in Oklahoma. What? This was a young single father who took his kids to get school supplies and ice cream.
Right.
And ended up being shot by Julius Jones, who followed him from the ice cream place with his kids and then shot at his kids and sister.
Correct.
It's the saddest thing. That was their flip-flops, the kids' flip-flops were left in the car. Mm-hmm. Then they rolled over his dead body, drove over it, getting away. So I mean, there's a reason he got the death penalty. This was a heinous, heartless crime. And that's why he got the death penalty. And then she has the gall to say that Bob Macy, who didn't try this case, who's the DA, racialized this case.
So they need
hypocrisy. You're racializing this case. You've done nothing but racialize this case since day one.
And I'm glad that you made that point, because I thought of that last night when I was going back over, because I understand and I acknowledge that there is still an issue in certain situations of racism in America, period. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to try and dispute it. I totally agree with that. However, the individuals that made this matter about race was none other than the Julius Jones campaign and side. The reason that she reiterates that Paul was a white business owner is the same reason that they say that he was in this is a safe neighborhood. They needed to make it look like it was like a war of like cities or something, where these horrible people are coming into Edmond. They needed that for their narrative because it needed to fit in this racial, discrimination that they keep spinning. And
but the problem is that their alternate suspect is Chris Jordan, who's also Black. So
right.
I mean, I don't really understand how
Would they be
that
doing the
makes it
same
any
thing
less
for Chris?
racist for
Right.
them.
They needed that because it fit the puzzle piece at that time. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think more than Amanda Bass, CeCe Jones made this incredibly more about race in that interview than Amanda Bass did. And I'm disappointed a little bit.
But they're also saying that they still have a path forward to fight for him.
Correct.
So what is their path forward? Because my understanding from Shelley Levasseur and David McKenzie, who've been guests on my podcast, is that the Oklahoma Constitution, once you get a commutation, that's it. So what path forward? So is their path forward
So
that they're going to continue to fight till he's out?
Well, I think you can bet the house on they will. They've indicated that they're not done. They weren't done. Everything that they have done has proven to me and to others that they're willing to continue no matter what and no matter the cost. And that's terrifying. Not just in this case. This isn't just for me. What's happening right now in the state of Oklahoma is not just about the case of Julius Jones. I said it today and I'll say it again. I really don't want to give this guy any more airtime. But the fact of the matter is, his case and what has happened has set a precedence. And what happens from here is going to set a precedence for the state of Oklahoma, for the rest of them. And so the answer to your question is there a path forward? They're going to try to make one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's evident by today. One of the other reasons we were talking about for this evening was there is a bill that is in the House for the state of Oklahoma. And the long and short of it is it would reinforce what Shelley and Mackenzie already told you, which was once you get that commutation, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So basically,
what's the name of that bill?
It is 3306. It's House Bill 3306, and it's authored by Mr. Pfeiffer. And basically, what it says is that once you get to the point, I'm sorry, that is not, I think I just gave you the wrong bill. Once you get to, if you are on death row and you receive a commutation or you receive clemency, what it's stating is that past that point, you're done. You will spend the rest of, if you get life without parole, if you are serving a sentence, not if you're sentenced to, but if you are serving a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, you cannot apply for commutation. And that's incredibly important, not just in this case, but for the other cases. And I don't think they were expecting that, because I know we heard after that order was put in place by Stitt that, well, if we get a new governor, not just heard, the Jones campaign was posting things of that nature and telling all of its followers, we'll get a new governor, we'll vote him out. Governor Stitt was the best thing in the world prior to November 18th.
Yeah.
But now they can't stand him. And the comments that CeCe Jones Davis made about the leaders in Oklahoma was disrespectful, to say the least.
Well, this was a crazy podcast, because here you have an anti-death penalty advocate asking questions like, why does Oklahoma want to kill Julius Jones so badly? That was one of her questions.
Right.
So it's this pinning of people who are seeing through the death penalty as barbaric, and the real psychopaths and the real killers. And Julius Jones is just this fantastic. Let's just take a look at Julius Jones for a second.
Okay.
This is a gang affiliated guy. Whoop, can you see that? With gang tattoos. So, I mean, this is their I mean, it sounded like they were talking about Jesus Christ when they were talking about him. He was a brilliant man from a good home, and he just
Mhm.
got caught up on the wrong side of the law somehow.
He had a
This was a
promising
guy with
future.
flunking out of college. Yes, he did get himself into college. Good for him. But he was flunking out and was into robbing cars, carjacking at that time.
Well, and
Um,
that's what's so funny about, or
of the
funny,
time of Paul House murder. Yeah.
right? So what's humorous about that is that's what CC Jones Davis said was, he had a promising future ahead of him. Well, it depends on what side you're on. If you're on the side of the facts and the transcripts of the trial and everything else, and did your research, you'll understand that Mr. Jones was already not on a good path. He already had prior felonies, which they'll deny as well. He didn't, but they have to say that because they have to believe it to be able to do the level of action.
Well, listen, I'm no stranger to propaganda or
Mhm.
I have a point of view with my podcast. I ask questions because I want certain answers. But the difference between me and this movement is this movement does not want you to look at the record or
Right.
to look at both sides.
The
They
truth.
only want you to look at their side. When they
Right.
say how you can help Julius Jones or any one of their pet killers, they always say go to the Innocence Project. That's where they in fact hide the record, which should be
Mhm.
red flag number one. Um, so from the public, they don't put it out there. You can't find it on the Innocence Project website. They have their version of their cases, and believe me, their version is very different from the truth. And they're getting bolder every year with their gigantic whopper lies for these psychopaths. This movement, I mean, I'm sorry, but this movement, it never gets better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
No.
it only gets darker every year that I research it.
Do you know how dark it got? Oh, okay,
Mhm.
so this was an appalling point for me, and I'm going to back up real quick. That House bill that we are talking about is 3903, and
Okay.
it was authored by Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you.
Um,
Okay.
so, as far as it getting darker in the Innocence Project, in that interview that they just did, Amanda Bass states that there were two people in the state of Oklahoma that were exonerated, which first and foremost, exonerated means that they're not it's not thought that they have any guilt in that or anything to do with that, or they're not, liable for that. And that wasn't the case. What happened is they were in fact released from prison. And I'm talking about Paris Powell and I believe it's Yancey. Yes, Yancey. They were let out in 2009 due to uh, at, basically the DA did not turn over information regarding a plea deal. Okay, so they didn't let them know that. So when they didn't do that, they let him out. Well, what's appalling to me is she uses these two individuals as individuals that, were in the same position that Julius Jones were, and they did time for something they didn't do, and they're these great individuals. You want to know what those two individuals have done since they were released in 2009? One of them's back in jail, won't be even out until 2025 for assaulting a police officer. The other one was charged with rape and kidnapping 2 years later, found by
Ooh.
DNA evidence, ends up representing himself, and on a technicality again, uh, he gets acquitted. Nonetheless, these two individuals who she claims are examples are repeat offenders, just like Julius Jones was a repeat offender. And that is what is so important for me about this bill, is that it will prevent, if you have a path and you are shown to be a repeat offender and with felonies and a violent repeat offender, this will ensure that you're not going anywhere. And not just for murderers. We have another
Mhm.
case in Oklahoma, Lawrence Anderson. He was released by the Pardon and Parole Board when he shouldn't have been, because they did some mixed calculations. It was at the time where they were doing that mass commutation thing with Kelly Doyle, and Adam Luck and all of them, and they let him out. And the man ended up killing 3 people, like we talked about the other night, within a couple of weeks. Now, this bill, again, would prevent that, because if you have violent crimes, if you have, there's a different checklist now. And so when I saw today that Julius Jones' campaign is now coming out asking people not to vote yes for that, and to call your legislators because it's cruel and evil, and Miss Jones thinks that it's direct retaliation. Miss Jones, I got something for you. It's not a retaliation. It is truly the people of Oklahoma trying to stand up for the safety of Oklahoma, making sure that nothing like what happened in a pardon and parole board hearing and meeting, where you have people that are arranging the pieces just for their benefit and their belief, that it doesn't happen again. Because I challenge a person who wants to come to me and say that it's because we are cruel and evil. And, you know, Cece Jones Davis said that we have no regard for a Black man's life, and that we don't care if he lives or dies. I challenge you to have a conversation with me, or have a conversation with a 19-year-old girl who lost her mother last year because he's a violent repeat offender and was let out by the pardon and parole board. Try it. It's those things, Roberta, that are so huge right now. But this movement, so to speak, they don't care. They don't care. They just want to do something to put it on the list of exonerations when it shouldn't be on the list of exonerations to begin with.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience.
Okay.
Matt Schweitzer asks, does anybody know how exactly the Innocence Project survived the Anthony Porter all-story Simon case in Chicago, where they framed innocent all-story Simon to release Anthony Porter from the death row, and that case ended the death penalty in Chicago? Well, David Protest is running the Chicago Innocence Project. So they don't have a problem with David Protest's behavior. And that should tell you everything you want to know about the Innocence Project and their values and the way they operate. They think the way David Protest handled himself. And that it's a great question because, you know, they are the kings of hypocrisy. They're supposed to be against false confessions, eliciting false confessions, and changing the laws to avoid false confessions when they're doing it themselves. When it's handy for them to do it, when they have someone they want to get out, when they have a pet murderer, it's outrageous. So and this is what I said to you. I think we were talking what this does. We were talking about the Richard Glossop, which came up in this podcast thing, does is they're bringing in this independent law firm, which is very connected to anti-death penalty organizations and the Innocence Project. One of their lawyers was involved in freeing Nevis Coleman in Chicago, joined Reed Smith. So this is not, they said in that press conference, this won't cost the taxpayers anything. And boy, is that the biggest lie, because what they're doing is they're inviting in this movement into Oklahoma, and it will cost the taxpayers a heck of a lot if they get in the laws that they want to get in and start catering to this movement and passing these kind of laws. It will be a disaster. And you only have to look at New York, Chicago, San Francisco, or any of the other cities where they've gotten their way.
To follow up on his question, so what they're referring to, what happened in that Porter case was it was a clinic that was done by a college that Protest was at.
Right. So the DL Journalism School, and they have their own Innocence Project.
Right. So after that happened, Protest was sent away from that. But I want to also, it's not just
listed as the Chicago Innocence Project.
Right. But there's more than just the Innocent Project. There's all of these other entities that basically all piggyback off of each other, and they all work together. You know, interesting that you talk about Glossop. So today started a trial on the execution protocol in Oklahoma. There are a few individuals who filed a lawsuit. Glossop is one of those. One of the biggest parts about this House bill is it also states that the Pardon and Parole Board can only only make a decision as far as leniency or mercy for a sentence. If this bill were to go into law, they would not be allowed to hear a case of innocence, which is huge. Because if you paid attention, and I was there at this clemency hearing, you're basically retrying a case. They allowed Amanda Bass to retry a case to members who don't even have a law degree. True. So that in itself is important too, because when you take cases like this out of the judicial setting, you lose a lot of things. You lose knowledge, you lose facts, you lose law, but you also lose protection of victims and their families. Because in a court of law, they know what those are, and they're represented, and they have, this protection, so to speak, bubble around. And when you take that out and you put it in a setting such as a Pardon and Parole Board, who they're CEOs of nonprofits, and that's what you want to hear the innocence, that just makes no sense to me. And that right there, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really sure of anyone who has gone to death row and said that they're innocent, other than Donald Grant.
But they also make the point in this podcast that Oklahoma has had more death row exonerations, which is hilarious, because I know you just brought that up, but exoneration to them means we just got someone off on a technicality. That's what exoneration means. And Anthony Porter and All Story Simon are both I believe, listed. At least Anthony Porter is. Double check me on if All Story Simon in their list of exonerations. I think they're both in there. So that's kind of funny, because here we had McDougal at the press conference saying that there's no way that people can exonerate themselves on death row, and we're just executing innocent people left and right. So which is it? Is Oklahoma the place with more exonerations than any other state, even though they put more people to death than any other state? Or is it that they're just killing innocent people left and right, and that there's no way to claim real innocence or have your case looked at by your appellate courts? I think you asked the best question of that whole press conference. What about the appellate courts? So, yeah.
Well, and that's what's interesting, is that is what exoneration means to them. If they just help them get away from what the sentence is that they're doing, then that's an exoneration for them. However, I would like to point out, and this is what got me hot today, because there's many people who have said all along that it's lie after lie after lie, and they cannot convince of innocence without a lie. And I've said that for a long time. And here we are. Mr. Jones is no longer going to be executed. Yes, he's going to be behind bars, but at least he's alive, right? Because that's what they wanted before. So now, in that interview, Ms. Bass states that when you're talking about the exonerations in Oklahoma, and when Bob Macy was DA, because there was a time where we had a DA that was very harsh and very asking for the death penalty, in a lot of them. And Amanda Bass makes a statement that there were 6 of 54 death row individuals that were exonerated. Okay. So that's a statement that she made, that they were overturned. Today, Julius Jones' campaign states that out of 54 death row inmates, nearly half of those convictions had been overturned. So here we are again. We still have to lie. And, David McKenzie said it best. An innocent man does not have to lie.
Great point.
If you follow the Innocence Project or the wrongful conviction movement at all, you will know that they inflate the heck out of these numbers. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to throw it out. I mean, how many people are going to do the research? How many people in the state of Oklahoma just heard the story or heard what, Cece Jones Davis said on that interview? She said the biggest thing for Julius Jones, the biggest tool for them in getting him off was the last defense. Because it allowed, this is what she said, it allowed him to tell his story. Now, his story, not the story, not the truth, not the facts,
right?
His story.
Right.
And so in doing that, that was part of what allowed them to get sympathy and for people to see through, quote unquote, Julius's window of what happened.
Well, they said, how did you get 6 million people to sign a petition and get celebrities involved? By lying to them about the facts of the case. And who else is going to research this besides the few people that did?
Yeah.
And I can name them on one hand who actually read the record. I mean, so.
And that's, that's what's so frustrating is people don't have time to do that. They don't. But there are individuals out there that if you say something enough, then they're going to believe it. And it's going to become the truth in their mind. And I believe that is what is happening. And what I'm afraid of is it's going to continue to happen. And, you only give up when you stop talking.
Right. What can the audience do? I'm going to keep this one real brief tonight. What can the audience do to help you guys?
If you're in Oklahoma, I would encourage you to pay attention. I would encourage you to read the House bill. I would encourage you to not fall victim to the propaganda. Do your research. I'm here. My counterpart, Jennifer Harmon, is available. We are more than
Harmon. Yes.
Hey, girl. We are more than welcome to answer any questions. Just don't believe what's thrown out there. It's unfortunate that some people are. But when things are said, such as Amanda Bass, when them confirming that he was granted clemency due to overwhelming evidence of his innocence. I didn't see that on the order anywhere. Did you guys? And also Amanda Bass said that he was convicted of fatally shooting Mr. Howe. Yeah, we call that murder.
Right.
Murder. So
yeah, it's very odd the way she puts it. It's almost like the impression I got, and that doesn't mean it's the right impression, was that she think it was almost like she was describing that the racial injustices that Julius Jones suffered made it okay to kill Paul Howe. That's what I got from that podcast. Doesn't mean that that's what she was saying. That was the message I got. Doesn't mean it's right. You'd have to ask Amanda Bass, but I would certainly encourage people. It is to listen to it. Amy, thank you so much for.
You're welcome. I just want to tell everyone, hey, it's not just about this case. And I know, again, I'm going to reiterate, it's as a whole, one of your family members could fall victim to a violent crime tomorrow. And if certain laws are allowed to stay in place, if certain laws aren't adjusted, you could be sitting in that very same situation. And I think it's important to look at that. And I think it's important to think about that before you just turn your eye and say, oh, I hate politics. I didn't either. But if you want any more information, you can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, Victims Innocence Project. Okay. And thanks for having me, Roberta.
Thank you. I mean, they're really, you're right. They're absolutely inviting in what I describe as the wrongful conviction movement as a little shop of horrors plant, and it will eat us all. So thank you so much, Amy. This has been
thanks, Roberta.
Really fun.